For more than 600 years, the Ottoman Empire was one of the most powerful and influential empires in human history. Founded around 1299 by Osman I in northwestern Anatolia, the empire grew from a small frontier state into a vast empire spanning three continents. At its height, the Ottomans controlled much of southeastern Europe, Western Asia, and North Africa. Their territory stretched from the gates of Vienna in Europe to the Arabian Peninsula, and from the Caucasus to Algeria. They ruled over millions of people belonging to different ethnicities, languages, and religions. Their capital, Istanbul, became one of the richest and most important cities in the world. For centuries, Ottoman armies were feared, their navy dominated important seas, and their rulers commanded immense power. Yet despite its strength and achievements, the empire eventually collapsed. By 1922, the Ottoman Empire had ceased to exist. How could such a mighty empire fall? The answer is complex and involves centuries of military decline, economic difficulties, political instability, nationalist uprisings, foreign interference, and the devastating consequences of global war. The Ottoman Empire reached its golden age during the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent in the 16th century. Under his leadership, the empire expanded to its greatest extent and became a dominant world power. Ottoman armies conquered new territories, trade flourished, and the government functioned efficiently. The empire became a center of culture, architecture, science, and learning. Magnificent mosques, bridges, palaces, and public buildings were constructed throughout the empire. However, after Suleiman's death in 1566, the empire gradually began to face new challenges. Although it remained powerful for many years, the foundations of future decline had already started to appear. One of the earliest causes of decline was the changing nature of global trade. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire benefited from controlling important trade routes between Europe and Asia. Merchants traveling along these routes paid taxes and generated wealth for the empire. However, during the age of exploration, European powers such as Portugal, Spain, and later England discovered new sea routes that bypassed traditional Ottoman-controlled land routes. As maritime trade expanded, the economic importance of Ottoman territory decreased. Trade that once passed through Ottoman lands increasingly moved through the oceans, reducing revenue and weakening the empire's financial position. At the same time, Europe was undergoing dramatic transformations. The scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, and later the Industrial Revolution gave European nations significant advantages. New technologies, improved manufacturing, advanced weapons, and stronger economies allowed European states to grow rapidly. While European countries modernized, the Ottoman Empire struggled to adapt at the same pace. Factories, railways, and industrial production transformed Europe, but industrial development within the Ottoman Empire remained limited. This growing technological gap placed the empire at a disadvantage in both economic competition and military power. Military decline became another major factor in the empire's collapse. For centuries, Ottoman armies had been among the most effective fighting forces in the world. The elite janissaries were renowned for their discipline and skill. However, over time, the janissary system became increasingly corrupt and inefficient. Membership was often gained through privilege rather than merit, and many janissaries resisted attempts to modernize the military. As European armies adopted new weapons, tactics, and training methods, the Ottoman military fell behind. Repeated defeats exposed these weaknesses. The failed Ottoman siege of Vienna in 1683 marked a turning point. After this defeat, the empire began losing territory to rival powers and struggled to maintain its previous dominance. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, the Ottoman Empire fought numerous wars against expanding European states. In particular, conflicts with Russia proved devastating. Russia sought access to warm water ports and influence over territories controlled by the Ottomans. Repeated wars resulted in significant territorial losses and weakened Ottoman prestige. The empire also lost territory to Austria and faced growing pressure from other European powers. Each defeat reduced Ottoman resources, weakened military morale, and damaged confidence in the government. Political instability further accelerated the empire's decline. Effective government became increasingly difficult as the empire grew larger and more diverse. Some sultans were capable rulers, but others lacked the leadership necessary to address the empire's challenges. Corruption became widespread in many parts of the administration. Government positions were sometimes awarded based on personal connections rather than competence. Powerful groups often competed for influence within the palace, creating instability and preventing meaningful reforms. As a result, the government struggled to respond effectively to changing circumstances. Another major challenge was nationalism. The Ottoman Empire was home to many ethnic and religious groups, including Turks, Arabs, Greeks, Armenians, Kurds, Serbs, Bulgarians, Albanians, and others. For centuries, the empire had managed this diversity through a system that allowed different communities a degree of autonomy. However, during the 19th century, nationalist ideas spread across Europe and into Ottoman territories. Many groups began seeking independence and self-rule. Nationalist movements emerged throughout the Balkans. The Greeks successfully fought for independence in the 1820s. Later, Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, and other regions gradually broke away from Ottoman control. Each independence movement weakened the empire and encouraged others to seek freedom. Economic problems continued to worsen. Maintaining a large empire required enormous financial resources. Military modernization, administrative reforms, and infrastructure projects were expensive. To cover these costs, the Ottoman government borrowed heavily from European banks. Over time, foreign debt became a serious burden. Eventually, the empire struggled to repay its loans. European creditors gained increasing influence over Ottoman finances, reducing the empire's economic independence. Foreign powers often used economic pressure to advance their political interests within Ottoman territory. Recognizing the need for change, Ottoman leaders introduced a series of reforms known as the Tanzimat reforms during the 19th century. These reforms aimed to modernize the military, improve education, strengthen government institutions, and create greater equality among citizens. New schools were established, legal systems were updated, and efforts were made to modernize the economy. Although these reforms achieved some successes, they faced resistance from conservative groups and failed to fully solve the empire's underlying problems. The pace of reform was often too slow compared to the rapid changes occurring elsewhere in the world. Foreign interference became increasingly common as European powers competed for influence in Ottoman affairs. Britain, France, Russia, and other powers frequently intervened in Ottoman politics. Some sought economic advantages, while others aimed to expand their territorial influence. European governments often portrayed themselves as protectors of various ethnic and religious groups within the empire, providing opportunities to interfere in Ottoman internal affairs. This weakened Ottoman sovereignty and made it more difficult for the government to maintain control. By the late 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was often referred to in Europe as the sick man of Europe. This phrase reflected the widespread belief that the empire was in decline and unlikely to survive much longer. Nevertheless, Ottoman leaders continued to seek ways to preserve and strengthen their state. In 1908, the Young Turk Revolution attempted to modernize the government and restore constitutional rule. While these efforts introduced important political changes, they could not reverse decades of decline. The final and most devastating blow came with World War I. When war broke out in 1914, the Ottoman Empire allied itself with Germany and the Central Powers. Ottoman leaders hoped that military victories would help restore the empire's strength and prestige. Instead, the war placed enormous strain on an already weakened state. Ottoman forces fought on multiple fronts, including the Middle East, the Caucasus, and the Gallipoli Campaign. Although some victories were achieved, the empire suffered massive casualties and severe economic hardship. Food shortages, disease, and social unrest became widespread. As the war continued, nationalist movements intensified, particularly in Arab regions. Supported in part by the Allies, various groups sought independence from Ottoman rule. Internal divisions further weakened the empire's ability to resist its enemies. By 1918, the Central Powers had been defeated, and the Ottoman Empire faced military occupation and territorial partition. Large portions of its territory were taken or placed under foreign control. Following the war, many believed that the Ottoman Empire would disappear entirely. However, resistance emerged under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. He organized the Turkish national movement and led the Turkish War of Independence against occupying forces. After years of struggle, his movement succeeded in securing control over Anatolia and establishing a new Turkish state. In 1922, the Ottoman Sultanate was officially abolished, bringing an end to more than 6 centuries of Ottoman rule. The last sultan left the country, and the empire formally ceased to exist. In 1923, the Republic of Türkiye was established with Mustafa Kemal Atatürk as its first president. 1 year later, the Ottoman Caliphate was also abolished, marking the final end of Ottoman political institutions. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire was not the result of a single battle, ruler, or event. Instead, it was the culmination of centuries of challenges: economic decline, changing trade routes, military defeats, political corruption, nationalist uprisings, foreign interference, mounting debt, unsuccessful reforms, and the destruction of World War I all contributed to its downfall. Yet despite its collapse, the Ottoman Empire left a lasting legacy. Its influence can still be seen in the cultures, architecture, traditions, and political landscapes of the Middle East, the Balkans, North Africa, and beyond. The story of the Ottoman Empire remains one of the most fascinating examples of the rise, transformation, and fall of a great world power.